Hi, Dr. V and Hussein. I'm Chrestine Gerhards. I'm in the Summer Business Intelligence class 2013, and this is my presentation on business intelligence at Ancestry.com. So, Ancestry.com is the largest genealogy website in the world. It was started in 1997 in conjunction with the Church of Latter-day Saints, who has accumulated one of the largest stores of genealogy records in the world. They have 1,000 employees, 1.7 million subscribers. They had $400 million in revenue for 2012, and they currently have over 11 billion records requiring 4 petabytes of storage. So it's quite a bit of storage that they have. Ancestry.com's mission is to help everyone discover, preserve, and share their family history. They basically are a company that traces your ancestry and your family tree. They have many, many sources of data that they draw from at Ancestry.com. They have accumulated millions and millions of birth, death, and marriage certificates, census records, military records, immigration documents, family trees, written histories including religious texts like the Bible and the Quran, and they really have also relied heavily on the Church of Latter-day Saints genealogy records. So they have a bunch of different forms of data sources. BI is an extremely important tool at Ancestry.com. When somebody goes to this website, they're able to enter a family name, a birth date, a place of birth, perhaps even a job that they knew that their ancestor had. And through these drill downs, Ancestry is able to locate and find who your ancestors are. When the company first began in 1997, their only BI was a database. It was a database where every single record was entered by hand by a human being, and that's all they had. However, as they have improved, they've added a lot of features that they use with BI, and the main one, of course, is data mining. Through the digital genealogy records. And also, they have added a really cool new feature where they can do data mining based on DNA samples. So a user can actually take a cotton swab and swab the inside of their mouth and send it to Ancestry.com. And through that DNA, they don't trace ancestors per se, but what your cultural makeup is, whether you have Viking blood in you or if you belong to a certain tribe in Africa. They're able to give you that information. The biggest form of BI that Ancestry uses that's probably a little unique to Ancestry is that text mining is their most important BI feature, because most of these records are in written form, and so Ancestry has to be able to key on physical names like John Smith, on coal miner, on San Francisco, and so and a lot of these records are actually handwritten records. So text mining is a super important form of BI that Ancestry uses. Now, because they do use so much BI, they also have to use a lot of technology and several vendors that we're all very familiar with. In the very, very beginning, like I said, the only thing that they had was a database that Ancestry.com themselves generated. So it didn't have any sort of links, any sort of drill down capabilities. So you would find one record and then write it down, and then you'd have to go on and find another record. So you can imagine this became incredibly intensive for the user. And you actually received a poster from Ancestry.com when you registered for the site, and it would be a big family tree, and you would hand write the record down, and then you'd go and search for the next record. So there was no way to link them to each other back then. However, in 2005, they did switch to a SQL Server database, and it incorporated their old records. And it did allow the user to have the ability now to do data mining, where they could go from one record to the next record and follow a certain path, and even link names together so that so that they could find their family tree. It also allowed them to stitch records together. So if they knew, for example, that their ancestor was working on the railroad in 1949 in San Francisco, and they also know that he was in the military, maybe in the 30s, then they were kind of able to join those records together to find their ancestor. But by 2010, Ancestry.com had gathered so many records that they were literally drowning in their own information. Their servers were crashing on a regular basis, and the system was just no longer working for them. They realized they had a need for a massive parallel processing solution. And Scott Sorensen, who is the CTO of Ancestry.com, decided to select Hadoop to work with the old database structure. And this allowed the processing of many different types of information at the same time. For example, in the earlier example, instead of linearly going from my grandfather was, in the military in the 30s and he also worked on the railroad in the 40s, this system would allow record searches going on at the same time of all of those links and bring them all together. So Hadoop really, really changed their search capabilities.
Use a mouse.
Okay, so Hadoop is actually used as the initial repository for the storage and of the data. And in that initial repository is where all the information is cleaned and put into certain text formats so that it can be mined and things like that in the SQL Server data in the warehouse. In conjunction with Hadoop, Ancestry.com also uses Cloudera search software, Mongo, which is an open source database, Gridline, which is this really neat feature when you're looking at, say, a census record. You can actually click on one of the columns, say the date, and drill down further in that column. And it also uses MapR, which is a statistical software. So they use quite a bit of technology there at Ancestry. So one of the discussion questions I have is, what unique challenges did Ancestry.com face in selecting their business intelligence platforms? And I would say that Ancestry probably had a little bit different requirement that's set than something like a Target, where they're trying to see what products are purchased and what clients or what customers are more likely to buy one product than another product. Ancestry.com has one product. They are selling Finding Your Family Tree. So they really aren't so interested in the customer data as much. Their big platforms were handling massive quantities of data. They still really are a database. And so they didn't have quite the same they didn't need quite the same capabilities as other companies. However, they needed more storage, and they needed the ability to draw data from vastly different types of sources, like videos, handwritten records, digital records, old manuscripts. So they have to be able to take data from a lot of really different sources. So that was a real challenge for them in choosing their platforms. And what are the benefits of BI for Ancestry.com? Well, in the beginning, when all they had was their database, the attrition rate of their customers in the first year was 85%. People, unless they were serious genealogists, would go to this website, try for a while to find an ancestor. Maybe they'd find their grandparents, who they kind of already knew anyway, and really couldn't make it any further than that, because you had to hand go through all these records to really locate your ancestors. And also, if the information wasn't actually physically in their database, there was no way to get to it. Now, of course, you can drill out into other locations, into the National Archives, all sorts of other different locations. So, and then, again, all these connections had to be made manually, so they weren't linked for you. So, now you have the ability to do multiple searches and queries in parallel. multiple forms of data and multiple sources with just one query. You have the drill down capabilities, and you have the information stitching where records are permanently joined together once logical links are found. So it's actually a program that can learn and draw conclusions. Okay, so what are some other uses of BI that Ancestry.com could possibly use? Well, I think they've come up with a really, really clever one in the DNA matching. I think that's going to be a really amazing feature that they are able to add. And, you know, eventually with these types of traces of ancestry, I think I can really see a use where it can be tied into perhaps your medical history and a family history of chromosomal disorders and things like that. So I can see in the future how business intelligence for ancestry can even get bigger. And what are the challenges Ancestry.com faces with their BI structures? Basically, storage is Ancestry's biggest problem. As I said earlier, they already have 11 billion records. And now a really big event just happened in April where the U.S. government just released its federal census from the 1940s. And that's going to add, I think it's like, what is it, another 130 million to the 11 million records they already have. And also 3.8 million digital images. So this is going to be absolutely huge. And then also, they're going to need at least another 4 petabytes of storage just for the DNA chromosomal patterning that they're going to be storing. Another challenge that they have is the text mining is so important to them. And they've really realized that they're struggling with that because there's, you know, thousands of different languages that they're searching through. All sorts of different handwriting. They need better handwriting recognition software. Otherwise, they're going to have to continue to put all these records, all the handwritten records in by hand. So those are some of their challenges. And then they also struggle with fraud prevention because they are drawing this knowledge from people's family Bibles and, you know, written histories. And if the historian got it wrong, or if, like back in the day when a child was born out of wedlock, they certainly, you know, didn't keep the records of who the mother actually was. So sometimes the records are just plain wrong, and sometimes we write our own histories, and that can be a real problem. So they have to really identify their accurate sources. All right, and the materials that I used to come up with this program were a really good article in the Journal of Business Intelligence. It was called Ancestry.com Preps for the Flood of Census Queries. And also the Hadoop Framework Breathes New Life into Ancestry.com article was really helpful. The website Ancestry.com itself has an amazing amount of information in their press releases about their technical specifications and what they use. So that's my presentation on Ancestry.com. Thanks so much.